It's heckling too.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to State of DevOps. Thanks, everyone, for joining in, saying hi. Hi, Jeremy. I see Jeremy there. I see, I don't even know what this is. SVC. I don't know, but anyways, hello, Laura.
Hi.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for helping us put this together, Jeremy. We definitely miss you, but we're glad you're in there hanging out with us. Yeah, and like I said, welcome to State of DevOps. So really quickly wanted to go ahead and give a thanks to our sponsor, ThisDot. ThisDot, we are a development consultancy. So if you need help with modernizing legacy systems or just general stack augmentation, we're always happy to help. We get to work with some really cool people like Google, Twilio, Meta, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you. We have some upcoming events as well through ThisDot. So in-person events are returning. So if you're in Atlanta or visiting Atlanta, or anytime you want to come hang out in Atlanta, I help run the Atlanta meetup, the Modern Web meetup in Atlanta. So you can always come, and I'm already planning out next year's schedule. So if you plan out like me, you can come hang out. We also have monthly mentoring for women in tech. We do this every single month. This month we have Jessica, who's going to talk about like building your community. So she's really great. She worked with us, and then now she works at oh my gosh, my mind is completely blanking. Free Code Camp. Thank you. She works at Free Code Camp now, so she's amazing. And again, it's just a quiet, private place for like people to connect. And then also GDG Silicon Valley. So if you want to come check that out in the Silicon Valley, that's hosted at Google, and we have some really amazing speakers lined up. We're going to be doing some introductions and some panel questions as well. And so, if you have questions through this, feel free to go ahead and post it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And we also love to know where y'all are from. So feel free to post where everybody is logging in from. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm always happy to chat. Cecilia was my co-host and one of the panelists, but she couldn't be here today. But I wanted to give a shout out to her. She helped put together some of the panel questions, and she's awesome. So you should follow her and check out what she's doing at Ionic with AppFlow. Wanted to go ahead and just do quick updates and introductions. So starting with Brandon, since you're first on the slide.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am previously the creator of Blitz.js, but nowadays I am mostly working on Flight Control. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flight Control, and we provide developer-first infrastructure for AWS for teams who want minimal DevOps overhead. So kind of in the platform engineering space. And the update from our side is that we're getting ready to release a 2.0 with an all-new UI UX that's like 100 times better than the old one. We already have new users like starting to use it, and they're like, holy cow, like I never want to use the old one again. This is so good. So that's an exciting rewrite that looks like it'll be very successful.
Cool. Thank you. And next up is Bastian from Semaphore.
So, hey everybody, I'm Bastian. I'm from Semaphore. I'm a developer evangelist. We're a CI/CD company. We try to be a bit different than others, so be sure to check us out. And I don't know, regarding events, we'll be in New York at the end of September at DevOpsCon. So if anybody's there, join us. And we'll also be hosting a workshop, which will revolve basically around some of the war stories around CI/CD and some of the more advanced and complex pipelines. And we'll also have something open for people who want to optimize their pipelines. So check us out and we'll help you out.
That's exciting. I love war stories. It's like the, the gossip column, right? Like, does anybody ever log into like, what is it, like the Hollywood media to see what kind of trash fires are happening? Is that what you're going to give us at this conference? Maybe without names attached. Well, I'm excited anyways to see what comes out of that. Next up, JJ.
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is JJ. I work at a small startup that starts with an I and ends with a BM. You may have heard of it. Yeah, I'm a developer advocate. Like with most of us here, I don't know what that means anymore because the name changes drastically wherever you go. But my job is to be a personal nerd. And I've spent a lot of time in the CI/CD space. And if you ever need to get a hold of me, I really do have the email address of awesome@ibm.com. So drop me an email, and I would love to help you if I resonate with anything I talk about here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And next up, Laura.
Hello, folks. My name is Laura Santamaria, and I am a lead developer advocate focused on DevOps communities and cloud-native ecosystems at Dell Technologies. I don't really have a lot to plug specifically other than to say that I have a lot of communities here in the Austin area. So Cloud Austin is one of my meetups, DevOps Days Austin, Austin DevOps, a whole bunch of others, as well as KCD Texas, which is coming up soon. I won't steal Marino's thunder on that one, but I'm helping to advise them on getting that one going. So if you're interested, go take a look for it on LinkedIn. Otherwise, yeah, I'm here. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Yay.
So you can find me all over the internet as Nimbinatus. Everyone always wants to know how to pronounce it. It's Latin. I'm sorry. You know, as everybody else on the internet, I chose my handle when I was like 12. So, you know, we put up with what we have.
Thank you so much. And it's so cool that you're involved with so much stuff in Austin. That's amazing. So don't leave. They need you.
I plan to stick around for a little while.
Okay. And next up, Marino.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Marino Wijay. I am a developer advocate. Oh, actually, no. I'm a platform advocate, I think. I don't know. I don't know what I'm called anymore these days.
Developer and platform advocate, supposedly.
At Solo. Solo is a company that focuses in on application networking. So if you're using Kubernetes and you've got a bunch of microservices and you need connectivity, come to Solo. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I will say that Solo contributes heavily to an open source technology called Istio. It's a service mesh. And it's mind-blowing to see how far along it's come along. So just recently, 1.19 was launched and comes with a bunch of new enhancements and capabilities. So go check it out. Also, I'm going to be at a few conferences and events in the next little while, heading to Texas Cybersecurity. And I think I'm going to be at KCD Texas doing something really cool at the start. I mean, it hasn't been officially announced, so I really don't know if I can say it. Okay, I'm going to be keynoting KCD Texas, and I'm really excited.
I was going to say, you have official permission. Yeah. Yes, you can say so.
Awesome. Okay, so I will be keynoting, and I'm really excited about that because it's my very first keynote. So one, thank you, Laura and JJ, for giving me that opportunity. I'm just so humbled. And two, you know, I've got all these other events that I just hope to meet you all at. Whoever is there, I'll be at KubeCon. I'll be at, I'm not going to be at reInvent, but I'll be at KubeCon. I'll be at ATO. If any of you are there, come along, hang out. Let's have a chat.
Yeah, you seem like you have a friendly face. I would come up to you.
Love it. Awesome.
Okay, and last but not least, Yuri.
Yeah, hey, my name is Yuri. I'm calling in here from Italy. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Experience at NX. And yeah, I have some recent news or some last news that we just launched our NX 16.8 release, which is again packed with stuff. Kind of in context with this call here, or this live stream, there's a lot of performance-related stuff in there, which is always good on like CI stuff, right? A lot around optimizing and scaling TypeScript projects, although apparently everyone migrates off TypeScript recently, so I'm not sure about that. And as Tracy mentioned before we went online, like we have a conference coming up at the end of September. So Bosch and I will actually be in New York. We will have like a small in-person event at New York where we are live streaming it for free for everyone to join. So if you want to participate there, like just go to nx.dev/conf. And it is actually very much related to this live stream. So the whole DevOps part, NX Cloud is really big, like on like the DevOps side, on CI, people want to have speed there. And so we have some major announcements there, so which I'm super excited about. cannot tell much more yet. So if you wanna check that out, definitely chime in there.
It's exciting. How fun. Okay, well, that does it for our introduction. So if you have any direct questions for any of these panelists, again, feel free to post it in chat. Wanted to go ahead and just start off with some questions. Like, first off, what's the most impactful trend y'all have seen lately this past year in DevOps? And again, feel free to make this a collaborative conversation, and audience, feel free to ask additional questions. But a trend I'm hearing from you all, just as you're introducing yourselves, is very much how do you make DevOps easier?
I'd even take it one step farther and say security is a higher standpoint of like, there's a mesh of making CI and CD easier, or DevOps easier as a whole, and then adding security to it too. Obviously, at a large company like I am, I get the enterprise exposure a lot more, but there's still a lot of people out there who just don't know how to do this. And as we're moving into different worlds that we're moving into, for instance, like me with Watson X, of course, I mean, I spend time in AI. There's still all this space of people behind trying to catch up. So I think the trend is still trying to learn how to do this.
I have to agree with JJ that in general, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, DevOps has been out for a long, long time. Everybody knows how to do this. Everybody knows how to do, like, why are you still talking about it? And the fact is that, so a couple things. One, DevOps is definitely still around despite the DevOps is dead tropes that you see everywhere. Mostly because, like, it's become such a nebulous concept for a lot of people who don't really understand it. And there's a lot of people who are just trying to figure out, how do I bring this culture of collaboration to my company? Because the fact is, it's a people problem, which are always hard. But also people are realizing that, like, platform engineering, it's DevOps in another trench coat, right? It's just add more to the whole idea. And so we're just finding new ways to do things. That's the trend that I see, is that a lot of the people that I talk to are just trying to say, like, how does this fit? Oh, it still does. Okay. So how do I add this yet again to my toolbox, and how do I expand my concept? Jeremy, that was really bad. Nimbanatus has nothing to do with nebulous, but you're trying really hard. But yes, DevOps to me is just, people are still trying to get their hands around it. They're still trying to understand, how do I bring this to my company, even if it's a larger company, because everybody always says it's harder at a larger company to change. And that's actually not true. It's harder at a company that can't handle the risk. That's the question. So that's the trend I see.
And the technology is not hard, right? It's the people. It's the people.
Tech is shiny. Tech is shiny. The tools are the fun things to talk about, right? But the standard stuff still applies. And no matter how many shiny tools you throw at a problem, it's never going to just suddenly magically work.
The funny thing, though, about that is I think everyone gravitates towards those shiny tools first, and then they decide, oh, how do we wrap a strategy around this? And if you look in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, Kubernetes has been the forefront of that. Right? If you're doing Kubernetes, all of a sudden you're doing DevOps, but are you actually doing DevOps at that point, or practicing the principles of DevOps? And the reality is you're not, because you've just taken a technology because of the hype and decided you need to map it to your technical strategy because you think it's the best fit. It's going to address a lot of your problems. And while it could, I mean, you haven't addressed the culture aspect of it. Kubernetes is just a placeholder. It could be anything. It could be Mesosphere. It could be virtual machines with vSphere. It doesn't matter what it is. I think going back to your points, JJ and Laura, we literally need to focus on the process and understanding the culture behind why we need to start using these tools and practices as well.
Yeah, I think I'll chime in on that too. Like, I think overall the past year with the recession, or maybe it's not a recession, but economic decline, like companies are really trying to be more efficient and optimize the processes and have more momentum and less friction among the different teams and orgs within the org. And so, yeah, I think we need to focus more on the DevOps principles and the things that actually like move the entire organization along and help people to collaborate more together than specific like tools or specific things, because those are not silver bullets.
That, in my opinion, is so hard because you're talking about, again, not technology, because technology being the easy part, but this whole like, I think, with DevOps, as there's more tools and as there's more advancements, all of a sudden, people are like, well, what am I going to do with my job? I'm going to be, with AI, my job is going to be gone, but what does that actually mean? And helping people understand that, this is not what it actually means, but what does it mean for that organization? But again, it's like, you can only make amazing technologies, but maybe there needs to be better conversations around that. Marino, ideas for your keynote. What about you, Yuri? I mean, y'all and NX are, really kind of like leading the change around monorepos and evangelizing monorepos and trying to facilitate change in that area.
Yeah, I mean, like my exposure to DevOps is mostly on the CI side, right? Because like we are we lead from the whole, if you want, developer perspective, like providing their tools for developing locally and making that efficient and that type of stuff, organize code well and that type of things, right? But then obviously at some point, well, you gotta merge that PR somehow into the main branch, right? That's where we usually then chime in on CI, trying to be there efficient as well. And it kind of goes in line with what has already been said to some degree, right? That they're often, and I've experienced it personally mostly with bigger companies, because those are mostly our clients, if you want, right? That we actively interact with, that you have those culture clashes where like there are existing, let's call them more ops that manage all those pipelines. They have their established kind of setup and scripts and stuff. And then there comes the developer world, who's like, oh, we're super efficient with that type of setup. How can you get these things together, right? And then that's where those clashes happen, and that's where usually we are involved, trying to kind of facilitate between the two sides, right? Because we kind of know the actual things that need to be optimized in order to make things fast, because that's where we kind of spend our day to day to kind of improve what an app specifically gives you. But then you have all that kind of fear, but what if I give up? It's almost most often like giving up control, right? And I can totally understand that. If you're the person in charge, or someone gave you that, like, hey, you are the person in charge for that CI pipeline to work, or that CD pipeline to work. And then out of a sudden someone comes in and like, hey, we have this new cool shiny tool, whatnot, right? We work super well with that. Like, let's use that, right? Because those are the type of conversations that usually kind of happen. And so it's very much like that fear of giving up control of like what happens if something goes wrong, like often responsibilities. And in smaller teams, I personally saw this working much, much easier, because like there, what often happens is like you have that goal that you need to ship something, right? And everyone's kind of focused on that. While as companies get bigger and bigger, and like talking about Fortune 500 and up, like it's more about responsibilities, right? This is my area, this is your area. I'm in charge of this one. I'll make sure it works. Don't worry, I'll make it fast, or something like that, right? And then you kind of have that like throwing things over the wall back and forth, right? Which sometimes is unfortunate. But yeah, we're working kind of in that direction, trying to find good ways to mitigate those or facilitate those type of discussions. But yeah, to be honest, we're just at the beginning, right? Like we have been focused a lot on the developer side of things, and are now going more into the DevOps side of things. We're like, hey, how can we kind of get into that part where it's not scary, right? And doesn't kind of go into someone's boundaries, if you want, like their responsibility areas.
Well, everybody's talking about AI and ML stuff, right? Being more intertwined with software delivery. How are tools adapting to help DevOps processes with this? Like, you guys can see anything cool happening? JJ, you mentioned Watson.
Yeah, perfect tee up for something I have to talk about. So yeah, well, first of all, one of the things people don't realize is that everything that we talk about with AI, people don't recognize that we're still in our infancy. Yes, okay, ChatGPT can write a sonnet about Kubernetes, right? Like you can go ask ChatGPT, write me a sonnet about Kubernetes, and it's actually pretty good, and it changes each time. But you got to realize, what is AI? It's a yes man. It's a crony. It's trying to figure out what the most likely thing you want to do and do that. It's not trusted. You can't trust it. So what we need to learn to do is build a trusted way for AI to work. And believe it or not, if you anchor your whole ideas around AI as a whole, ChatGPT is Napster. It's stolen a bunch of stuff from the internet, compiled it, and turned it into a way to answer things. Watson X, which is the thing that I'm wearing literally the t-shirt of, is iTunes. We are actually working with the way that AI is supposed to be working, or how governments can actually use AI correctly. Enterprises can actually use AI properly. Things are attributed properly too. And that's important for the DevOps movement because things like Copilot exist. I know probably majority of people on this call right now use Copilot because it's so damn easy to use. Do you know we have no way of knowing where that model has been trained on? Microsoft will never give us that. If they do, they will like they say they'll take it from GitHub, but we just have to take their word at it. They could be stealing your code. How many secrets have come out because of that? And that's important to talk about in the DevOps movement, with the CI movement, with the cloud movement as a whole, because that opens up a whole world of security problems, right? Like if you just go through that thought experiment, all of a sudden you realize we moved way too quickly. Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to be respectful and put my hand up because I have no option to raise my hand virtually. But I was gonna, complement that with, when you think about AI, right? We have the ability to train AI. Could we not just train all of these language models to conform to a set of specifications so we don't have, why not?
Because we missed that boat. It's that simple. If you go to huggingface.co right now and look at all the different open source models that exist, there is no standardization of it. We created the system before the spec, right? And now we can't retrofit that spec on these things because people have already ran down that path. Like what's the American idiom? The horse has already left the barn, or the cows have left the whatever.
Cart before the horse.
Exactly.
No, the horse. You want the horse has gotten out of the barn. Like
yes.
it's too late.
Oh, that too.
You can't shut the door.
Thanks,
Exactly.
Canadian. Just kidding.
Yeah, but it's true, right? Like if we had decided this before the normies of the world started using ChatGPT, maybe we could have fixed this problem. But the normies have already started to use this. It's the calculator revolution all over again, but now with text. And we've missed it. We missed the boat. So we need to now figure out a way to use weird rules and guardrails to fix this.
By the way, Marie and I would have said cart before the horse too. Horse before the cart, I guess. So, but thanks, Laura. I didn't even know that idiom existed.
Well, so the idiom is that you should have closed the door before the horse could have gotten out of the barn. So you should have put the guardrail on. Sorry, I'll stop now.
Oh no, we can learn something new every day.
Yay! I want to bring this back to DevOps for a minute.
Yeah,
because I know like we could go down the whole realm of AI and discuss generative AI and the whole moral question around that. The big thing that actually I see when I hear generative AI or AI in general, even machine learning in general, when I look at this, is that it's enabling more people to communicate, whether that's they don't know how to write the code to discuss with somebody, so they kind of get a basic skeleton. I've had people come to me with like, hey, here's the basic skeleton that somebody like that my Copilot or whatever put together for an Ansible playbook. And it's like, okay, at least now we have a baseline of conversation. Or it's the, how do I write the email to say this properly? So that and say like to Grammarly, for example, hey, I don't want to sound combative. How do I make this more collaborative? So there is, I think, a place for it in that cultural question of how do we help people collaborate more? How do we make space for more collaboration through better tools like that? But obviously, generative AI is definitely touching so many other things. Machine learning has been touching so many things. This is not like a new thing. The generative AI is new, but machine learning behind it, I mean, that's been around. PyTorch, for example, like all of these different things have been around for a very long time. It's more of a question of, now that it's become a buzzword, a shiny tool, how is it getting integrated into things? And what is that morality question? But I think overall, it does help with that culture of collaboration and sharing and learning with one another to make room for more of that. So that's my take. You all can talk. I don't want to like shut everybody up.
So, I mean, one way that AI is helping me is like just build errors. If I like have some weird build error, then I just paste the logs into ChatGPT and be like, how do I fix this? And usually it'll kind of like help surface something that I kind of overlooked or something. And so like that's something that we're going to be looking at kind of building into the flight control platform is like, inline suggestions like, this may be helpful, maybe not, but saves you the step from the user from having to go do that.
Yeah, actually, one of the presenters at Cloud Austin a month ago did that for understanding a hack that came into their system. He did a whole breakdown of like the incident and how they used ChatGPT to figure out what it was. It was really kind of fascinating. Random user story that kind of backs up what you're saying, Brandon.
But I got to put my FSF hat on real fast and say, it tells me how that error happened, but where did that code come from to force that error, right? Like, we don't know how that model was trained from ChatGPT. And there's some poor bastard out there who didn't get the attribution they needed to say that, yes, this was the thing that happened. And I mean, don't get me wrong, what's the saying? The good programmers create stuff, best programmers steal, or something like that, something along those lines, right? And it's the same thing that's happened here. We need something to fix that problem. We need some way to say that, yes, Brandon, you wrote this code to do this thing to figure out this problem, and now ChatGPT uses this. I know I'm harping on it, but it's important to recognize it. There is a dark side to this.
So there's a lot of just stuff. I mean, I love technology, and honestly, the technology and everything we're talking about is the reason why we'll have jobs all the time, because every 5 to 7 years a new thing comes up, right? So it's exciting to hear all the innovation and all the challenges that are able to be solved through the next few years. What are some of the biggest challenges y'all see DevOps teams facing currently? And what do you think is behind these challenges?
I'm going to just throw in the fact that DevOps teams have all these technologies they have to, one, implement, support, lifecycle manage, etc. But they also, at the same time, are building upon technical debt, especially when there isn't a strategy in place. This is an ongoing thing, going back to Laura's point earlier around the shiny new object. Once that comes along, right, it feels like a lot of projects end up being parked and, put aside in favor of this new shiny object. And that's actually an ongoing problem that I'm seeing recurring. And this is a problem not only from a consumer standpoint, but from a company that decides to sell something to that consumer. So you take, for example, a company that has gone out to build a whole bunch of microservices, and they've already invested a ton. And then all of a sudden, through one relationship, a sales team is brought in and they say, oh, I think you can do this better if you decide to use, I'm just going to plug a Glue platform. And so to wash away all of that time spent for building up that strategy, that plan, just to implement this new technology is why I think we have issues in DevOps today, because we don't take the time to finish what we actually have started. We just kind of like ignore it. I think this is the subtle ADHD that kicks in. We're like, oh, this shiny new object comes by. Let's play with this. Oh, I think this is a better fit. Let's forget about everything else. And that compounds to the point that your investors, your accounting team sit there and ask, what happened to all of this time and effort and money we burned trying to build out the solution last year? And here we are trying to spend more money on something that we think might work, but actually isn't going to work, is not just a DevOps problem either. It's a tech problem.
Do you think that's comes from a lack of understanding from executives about kind of what makes like DevOps principles effective?
I think it does, because executives are the ones that are driving business challenges and decisions down to their tech teams. And you have these tech teams that are trying to translate, hey, I have this business problem that I have to solve. How do I solve it? Maybe I can solve it with what I already have, but then sometimes that just gets overlooked because there's something glamorous or amorous that shows up and they say, okay, maybe it's time to look at this because it could be the way we solve this problem. But they've, what Laura just said, we drop these plans that we've already enacted to get towards that end state, but some exec has just overridden everything we've done. And that tends to be a challenge too. A lot of it comes from the top.
I do want to throw in, I mean, I used to live in this world when I worked at a relatively small startup, where what we did is we went into those companies and told them they were doing their DevOps wrong, right? And we would come in with our software to change the way they were doing it. And we'd wine and dine them, right? And we'd convince the people in power to make that change, to give us lots of money. And it was a lifestyle, right? And I'm not speaking ill of the companies that do this, but there's a culture of this where all of a sudden you find the companies that did actually survive through the crucible of the startup world, and now they're on the other side, and now you have 4 different ways to slice your cheese, right? Like you just need to cut cheese once, yeah, and now all of a sudden you've got 4 different ways, and you're like, why now I have to spend how much time to consolidate this stuff? Like, we're trying to make money. Why am I messing around with AWS right now?
Yes. I think, technology generally is always leaning that way, right? Like, it's like, oh, here's a new tool we should introduce, or here's a new thing, or, oh, we're doing something innovative. And, companies want to be innovative, where I think improving on what's already there from a DevOps perspective and incrementally improving a pipeline, for example, is something that is probably more fruitful and cheaper than, hey, let's just rip everything out and decide that we're gonna, use
the incremental part.
Yes.
The incremental part is interesting, I think, because as was already mentioned, like, this is very much like a technology problem in general, right? That people just jump on that new thing. But very often what I've seen is also that, like, there's no good way of being able to still, like, stick to the things that are already working and kind of already kind of established within the company, but at the same time having some sort of process to kind of test out those new things, like in somewhat isolation, but still kind of in a useful way, and then have them kind of circling if they make sense or just drop off, right? So kind of, I don't know how you want to call it, kind of small labs or something, right? Where people can still kind of try out things in a kind of semi-safe way to some degree. You obviously need to have it on some sort of project. But that's something that you rarely see, right? But it would be a great thing, because like then people can to some degree satisfy their need to kind of play around with that new shiny tool, and then actually have a way to actively pitch it to upper like execs, just so like, hey, we tried it out on that side project there, which is like maybe just, let's say, deploying on staging or something, right? Or like on some sort of local dev environment, right? Where they can really like prove this is actually working and can actually be like a good addition to what we have already, rather than, hey, trying to just force it up on the whole organization, right? So unfortunately, that's very, very rare. That sort of like experimentation ability.
So I actually gave a talk just at DevOps Days Dallas about something similar. Not exactly talking about experimentation, but talking about how do you understand when it makes sense to start chasing a shiny new tool versus finishing what you're doing. Because like the famous case study is Target, right? Target had a very, very successful DevOps transformation. And part of it is the ability to see things to the finish, as Marina was saying, but also to experiment as needed. And I think the best way to look at this is, and JJ's going to grin at me, equilibrium states. So I used to be a scientist, so there's a whole story behind this, but basically there is the stable equilibrium state and the unstable equilibrium state, and they are very, very similar in appearance, but the question is, if you do a little bit of a nudge, if you say, okay, we're going to move to this new tool and we're going to try this new tool, but then if a new tool comes along and it can quickly unseat that tool, then it wasn't a good change in the first place, because it's too easy to change that equilibrium state, right? So to me, like, I feel like those experimentation worlds, part of the case that you need to prove is, if we put this tool into place, is it really, really easy to shove it out of the way? Or will it really change our process and change our culture as part of that change of the tool? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So that's how I look at it anyway.
I find it really interesting that you all focused on the technological aspect. So talking to different teams, okay, we always have some sort of solution to a problem that we have, and we can use some technology to solve X and Y. But I still see some people that don't understand what DevOps is and do we really need it. And I'm talking about smaller companies that are making transitions to, like a semi-large organization or something like that. And now we need to hire our first person that's going to do DevOps. But what is DevOps? I still see that this question is, to this day, unsolved, or maybe not quite clear. So that's a problem I still see happening. If we shove the technology aside, of course, we're going to find a solution to that. Or sooner or later, AI is going to find a solution to that. But making clear what DevOps is for a certain organization, that is still the key problem I see today. And DevOps people actually complaining that they can't do actual work by using technologies to solve something, because people keep coming to them and talking about stuff that's totally unrelated to DevOps.
I succeeded with explaining DevOps to some people who had a challenge understanding it by saying, do you use Xero to communicate between your teams? And of course I said yes, because who doesn't use Xero, right? And I'm like, well, imagine Xero being automated, where you can say, hey, I need a request of a VM, to go back to the vSphere instance that Marina was talking about at the beginning, right? And now it just appears. You don't have to go through the 7 different steps of the different teams, and it just kind of happens. That's the cultural change we're looking for. We're looking for a way to give you the velocity you need to work on things that actually make your business succeed, but you invest in the infrastructure around the automation to make it happen, so you don't have to put the quote unquote ticket in to be able to make that happen. And you're right, unfortunately it goes on deaf ears, because no one's like, well, why do I need to invest in this? It still works. But it's all about velocity. It's all about getting velocity for your business.
Well, it's also about the human side of it, in that case of giving people the space, the mental space back to be able to go do other things. A friend of ours, Sean Mooten, he often talks about the human side of DevOps, and that's really what it's giving you back. It's taking into account that there are humans as part of this, not people as cogs in a machine. So get rid of the process of, hey, we're going to send this ticket and it's going to send to somebody and they have to go and respond to it and come back. And there's so much mental space that you're losing there that could be used to, maybe it is for velocity in the business, or maybe it's just simply mental health for the people who are involved, right? Like, I think Sean nailed it down pretty well with that, is talking about DevOps is really about dealing with the human side and helping the human side go, whether that's making space for you to be able to think, or making it so that you're no longer dealing with that velocity question. So yeah, a lot of people don't understand what DevOps is. A lot of people just seem to think it's just CI/CD. It's not. There's so many other things involved in there. CI/CD is part of it. And again, we get back to the shiny tools are the fun things to talk about. I think that's Maddie's phrase. The shiny tools are always the fun things to talk about. But I don't know.
So the challenge is to have the empathy, though. You need to have the pain. to understand why, or at least it's easiest for human. Okay, you can be empathetic without actually going through the problem immediately. But it's so much easier to know, to be empathetic of the situation if you've gone through that pain. Like, I was a Perl hacker as a sysadmin for a while, and I know why that's bad, right? So, I mean, I got a lot of gray in my beard for a reason. But, it's really hard to find good DevOps people who understand the pain of why you're going through this situation, to have that psychological security and all that, which makes all of a sudden the group of people who can actually do this job gets so much smaller. When you start going through the mental exercise of who can actually do this digital transformation correctly, there's a whole world of who do you bring in. And I want to ask this to the team here. Can you technically have a junior DevOps engineer? Should we even have someone called a DevOps engineer?
Hold on.
What do we do?
Wait. Junior as in how many years in the industry, or junior as in this is the first time they're doing the role?
Great
Because
question.
to me,
Because junior means different. Yeah, means different to different people.
To me, that means something different, right? Like if somebody has some amount of time in the industry and they've experienced the pain, and that now they're becoming the DevOps engineer, which let's not right now argue about, is DevOps engineer a title? Let's not do that. I think that's counterproductive right now. But like the question to me is, if they have never, like if they're junior as in junior 2 working, like they're fresh out of school or fresh out of boot camp or fresh out of wherever they came from, that's different than I've put some time into the working world. I've seen the pain, I've experienced the pain, and now I'm coming to this concept of how do I bring this digital transformation, this DevOps transformation, culture, people over process over tools, right? How do I bring this to a company? That's a different question to me. So I think you can have a junior DevOps engineer if they've had some of that experience in their life in some way, shape, or form, so that they can find that connection to understanding why we say people over process over tools versus tools over process over people, right? Do they understand the difference, and can they find out why? So that's my challenge with that junior question, is which one do you mean?
Yes. Yes.
I'm just going to troll everyone.
I have to say, though, I mean, this conversation is so interesting because I did not imagine this panel or, State of DevOps to talk so much about the people aspect of things, right? And it's.
So,
I mean,
have you ever seen the visual funnel of people over process over tools?
I've definitely heard of it, but I haven't it's I think the thing that I find most interesting about how the DevOps industry, if you all are the industry, let's just call you all that for now, is thinking about problems that companies are trying to solve, because it's the conversations that I hear in leadership, right? So it's kind of cool to see, us all growing up together, and what is the next 5 years going to be, where, people are in, CTO or SVP level positions that have this level of empathy and, regard for psychological safety and emotional health and space, and talking about teams collaborating, people who truly understand what it takes, right? How is that going to change? If that is now leadership, I mean, some of you are in leadership positions, but if that becomes more of the norm in leadership, then what does that mean for the DevOps industry? Does that mean in 5-10 years or so, these problems are solved?
To me, people problems are never solved.
That is true too.
Because it's always unique to each group of people, right? We can make it better.
Yeah.
We can make it easier, maybe. But it's kind of hard because people are naturally chaotic. And I say that in the widest, scientific term. We're not predictable by any stretch of the imagination. So it's always going to change. It's never going to be easy. That's why people go straight to the tools, because they think, oh, well, if I can buy DevOps, I can buy the tool, I solve the problem, I can move on. And it's like, well, no, that's not how this works. You can put all the tools in place that you want, but it's not about people yet. I'll get off my soapbox.
I have a counterpoint to that. Let's take Git, for example, right? Git is an amazing version control system. I mean, for those that don't know, a lot of people might be using GitHub today to upload their code stacks, whatever it is. But I think Git itself facilitated a significant amount of collaboration. And I don't think that was the original intention. The original intention was to simplify our development streams so that we don't have conflicting branches and all of this fun stuff. But it actually fostered a lot of collaboration. When you go and look at an issue on GitHub, you see the conversations go on. But when you actually look at a repo, let's say an open source project, which has a set of guidelines for how you conduct yourself in that open source project, now you truly see some collaboration there. So I think GitHub may be specific, but I think that particular technology is one where you lead with technology and the output is a greater collaborative community that works together to solve various open source problems. I think that's probably the only exception I'd ever see, because every other technology out there is, we're going to solve a problem, a direct problem. But there wasn't a tool out there that actually took people and a tool and had them work together to actually collaborate, right?
I like that, because
But
there's a lot of builders here.
But is it necessarily like Git exactly as a tool? Because it could be like Mercurial or whatever, right? Isn't it more about like what happens later around it? Like GitHub
as a concept.
platform? Exactly. Because like for instance, I see it every day, like being in a monorepo space, for instance, right? Like without even talking about the exact tool you're using to implement one, we have seen collaboration go up just because of the monorepo concept, because now teams kind of have to collaborate to some degree because like they're sitting in the same repo. But it's not really like the tool obviously like helps you bring there to some degree. But what actually like fosters the communication and stuff is more about the fact they're now sitting in that, let's say, monorepo, or they have our own GitHub as the platform in that sense. So it's kind of like the tool leads you there, but like whether it's like that specific one or some other one that like implements the same kind of approach is often like, it shouldn't be that the discussion, right? But the practice around.
I haven't encountered a single tool where the ball keeps rolling and everyone gets to kick it. And I think GitHub happens to be just that.
Yeah, no, totally.
All right, well, somebody's sitting on a few $1 billion idea, so we'll start on something after this. You know, we again are talking a lot about like the people and the people problems and things like that. And, you know, there's been a lot of really great ideas shared around this. But I would say, you know, how do you cultivate a culture where both developers and operations teams collaborate effectively? Because I think, you know, the collaboration aspect between teams and kind of like the push between teams, right? All teams generally in engineering, but specifically in DevOps, is like the thing that a lot of companies tend to struggle with. Any advice?
You first set up a Nagios box to send out pages. I just aged myself, I know.
So there's a book called Team Topologies, which is kind of fascinating to read and explore. But one of the discussions is, how do you structure teams to foster that collaboration culture, right? I'd say read that. But my experience generally has been, the more you empower both sides, the more collaboration there's going to be. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Too often we get so focused on, we want to empower the developer. We want to empower the developer, et cetera, et cetera. People forget that, well, actually, we want to empower both. And so instead of setting the developer up on a pedestal, you set them at the same table. There's always the discussion of the round table. I don't know if people here have ever really heard this discussion, but the reason that in legend King Arthur picked a round table is that it put everybody on the same footing. No one was directly across fighting one another. We're sitting together at a table. And to me, that analogy is exactly how to build up that culture of we're all on an even playing field. We're all trying to get there. We're not trying to make generalists of our developers, making our developers become operators or become network engineers or become whatever. We're saying that all of these specialists at the table might have a little bit of knowledge about what everybody else is doing, but everybody has the same goal. We're trying to get to the same thing. And everybody's input is valuable. So starting out with that mentality is part of getting there. And I think a lot of the team topologies of like which ones are impactful of how the teams are structured often show that round table versus here's a square table or here's a rectangular table and I'm sitting across from the developer as an operator, or I'm sitting across from security. So generally I find that's the culture that works. I could give all kinds of
I
real
love
life
that.
examples from my history, but I won't.
I think that's
go
so
down the rabbit
important because, I think, you talk about this, this disconnect, Laura. I think, developers often are, new features, the innovation, right? So like we optimize for that. So like they're, more important versus DevOps is, making sure that things run and don't break and, is supporting innovation. You can't have one without the other. But, I just had a really great conversation with Jeff Hampton, who's director of engineering at Roblox. It's on the this.blog. It's equity of value in teams, right? Making sure that you don't forget why you're there. Why are you there? Because somebody's keeping the lights on, somebody's keeping things running, somebody's making sure that things don't break. That and optimizing for that is maybe even more important than innovation, right? Like the amount of value you can get from just optimizing and improving where you currently are, the thing that's making you money, versus, oh my gosh, we're going to spend, whatever, 80% of our budget on innovation and maybe get like a 5-10% return on something like that, right? So putting everybody at the same table is a great way to think about it. And managers, leadership really does need to think about doing that more. Any other tips and advice?
This might not be quite on topic regards collaboration, but when teams collaborate, usually it's the leads that collaborate. And I've seen one too many times excellent engineers being promoted to leadership roles that have no people skills whatsoever. And that is something that management usually just, it goes by them. And I guess you need to put more emphasis on what kind of people you want to promote and be careful about that. Because if you have an excellent engineer that enjoys solving engineering challenges, then of course he'll solve less challenges because he'll have other things he'll need to do, attend meetings and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I think we keep forgetting on and on and on. So yeah, that's also an important thing to keep track on.
So I have a question. In the dev world, we have this concept of cross-functional teams, or like it's much more common now to have teams where like a designer is like on the team, on the dev team, working together. Have you all seen any cases where like ops is kind of more distributed and like more embedded with teams? And do you think that like helps this?
Absolutely. So the example I like to pull out was, speaking of designers, I used to be the pipeline underneath the design team. I used to work with Sketch and all kinds of things. And then that team was then embedded in the development team that was building the UI. This is a bunch of companies ago. Generally, the cool thing was that they could turn to me and ask me any question about pipelines. At the time, I was doing a lot of pipeline work, or any of the server questions or anything like that. They could come and ask me questions, and that was part of that setup. So that's, I think, team structure be in team topologies? I forget the exact name of it. It doesn't really matter. The point is that yes, it is a very, very useful one depending on the structure of the rest of your organization. If the rest of your organization doesn't do it, it's kind of hard. But if everybody's used to these smaller teams, then yeah, absolutely. Embed operations, embed security, embed QA, embed everybody. Why not? It's amazing what you can do when you build it.
Oh, I love Jeremy in the comments throwing out 3-letter. What are they called? It's not an idiom. What is it? What is it, Laura? Help me.
Acronym.
Acronym. Thank you.
Abbreviations or acronyms, depending on how you read it.
IDP. Yes. Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, cool. Well, any other comments before we move on to the next question?
I do want to throw out just one last thing, which is, as much as we're talking about this, if you do not know where you're starting in the space, I hate to admit to it, but it's hard, and it's a moving target. Whatever you decide to do right now, you will change your mind before the first milestone, whatever that milestone is. That's the reason why we are talking about the same things we're talking about now, multiple years later, is because it's a moving target. So be sure to recognize that if you are going down this journey.
What about the plans, JJ? I mean, I always, talking to leadership about, transformation, right? It's like, okay, well, there's a 3-year plan for this. We've budgeted for 3 years to go down this path.
You're going to need 7, if not more. Or you look at quarter to quarter and make the choices then. Like you cannot put a clock on this. What's the joke about when you've decided to leave a job? Or no, what is it? As soon as you decide to leave a job and a company comes back with an offer to keep you there, a good company recognizes you have a clock now, because you will be finding something else, because they were able to keep you for N number more days, right? It's the same thing with the DevOps or digital transformation or DevOps movement, or whatever you call it. Is that there's a clock, but you cannot put a clock on it, because you will be going off and doing something else pretty soon.
So, we talked a lot about people, but like talking about, technology rise, right? So there's a lot of just like, new innovation, I feel like, happening in the space. Do y'all see any like, concepts or spinoffs thriving? I don't know, it's September. So this year, next year.
So the biggest concept that I've been seeing as a recurring theme is sustainability. Sustainability has to be weaved into pretty much everything we have to do just to save our planet. If you think about, let's think about an application, right? 100 lines of code. I know it's probably maybe 1 million lines of code, but imagine for a second if we were to able to provide that same function with half the amount of code. What does that actually mean for us down the line? It means less resources consumed, less memory consumed, less storage consumed, which means less operating devices, which means less power, which means less CO2 output, right? So when you think along those lines, a lot of technologies, let's say even in the cloud native ecosystem, are starting to gravitate towards implementing some sort of sustainability practices. So that's going to become a recurring theme, not only for the rest of this year, but even into next year. And maybe AI could help with that. Maybe it cannot. What I do see, though, is that not only are these cloud native open source organizations responsible or driving some of this change, we're starting to see some of the big companies, drive towards carbon net neutrality by, 2030 or 2050. 2050 is a little far out, but somewhere along the next 5 to 10 years. And that means something. That means we have to be concerned about climate change and global warming. We have to be concerned about the way we consume things. We have to be concerned about how much we can reduce the waste we have or that we produce, right? So in tech, that's what I expect to see, a lot of sustainability conversations. And in fact, I'm trying to think of a talk right now about sustainability and how it kind of ties into the world of cloud native and platform engineering.
I love that. That's going to be really interesting to start seeing that. And I think, again, innovation and the problems we're trying to solve never stop, right? There's always something new to kind of work on. Okay, well, I think that's it.
I can go for one
go
thing.
ahead.
It's not
Go
necessarily new in the past year, but I think it's maybe increasing somewhat is desire for preview environments. So temporary environments for pull requests that allow like teams to test each change in its own environment without kind of having a single staging where like all the changes are kind of stepping on each other maybe, and so it really helps like multiple stakeholders give feedback earlier in the process. And so like, Vercel has been really great at this for front end stuff. Back end is much harder when you have databases and things like that. And so that's one of the things that we facilitate and have been working on and seeing a lot of demand for that.
I just want to comment on the sustainability part. I find it funny that we talk about sustainability, but at the same time, we all know how much energy one ChatGPT query kind of takes. So even if we like go into that space, I guess the big guys will have, let's say, more input on that. So because unless you're not on AWS or any other platform, you can't have an effect on that. I mean, I can use clean energy for my server at home that's powered by the solar panels on my roof. But speaking otherwise, yeah, I guess that's something for the big guys to solve. Or how do you see that trend? If you have like any other insights that I maybe don't have.
For the normies out there, Laura and I are in Texas, and when we have issues with our power grid, the companies get priority over the people, which is nice.
Not
No,
always.
it's not. Not always, but enough.
Well, sort
enough.
of, yeah.
But that's it's a perfect microcosm of what Bosch-Jan, hopefully I said that right, Bosch-Jan, has said, is that we can do everything we can locally in our own little space, but as long as the big companies, they get priority on stuff, it's really hard for us to really move that needle, to use that horrible business term. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. And there's a lot more smarter people like Marino out there that will figure this out for me one day, right?
Marino's like, don't let, I don't want to be part of
With
this.
the help of some ChatGPT prompts, no problem.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of attempts to innovate from all kinds of different directions to address that. I don't know that I can comment on them because I'm not really part of those kinds of discussions generally, but I'm sure that that's on people's minds. Personally, speaking as myself, I don't use AI for many reasons. I also have a very, very strong skepticism of, do I trust what it's giving me and all of those kinds of things. But I don't know. It's a good question, I think, and it's definitely a consideration moving forward. And I think a lot of people are going to be talking about it as people start seeing it more in industry.
Well, generally, again, I'm so inspired by this conversation because I think, it's been a long time since I've been at a DevOps Days. I feel like my first DevOps Days was like 2010, 2011, 2012, something like that. I used to...
The first one in the US or the first one?
The first one I went to in the Bay Area. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that was 2012.
Yeah, it was like somewhere around there. It was at Hacker Dojo. It was great. But, it wasn't at Hacker Dojo. It was like at some place in Mountain View. I can't remember where it was. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I haven't been to a lot of DevOps conferences and had a lot of conversations, but the stuff y'all are talking about again is the stuff that I think is really at the forefront of changing how engineering teams generally work together. It's like best practices for engineering teams. So I think the DevOps world and kind of like this people over I forgot the second one. Process, people
over process over tools.
I remembered the tools part, but people over process over tools.
Process. Yep.
Yeah. And then, you know, that's really what needs to, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're in DevOps or not, right? But like that idea of how to effectively manage transformation, manage change, manage engineering is something that everybody needs to hear more often. So yeah, y'all should, you know, go run for president. It's the next step. But seriously though, I mean, really, I mean, those are some of the best engineering leaders. Like that's the stuff that they talk about, you know, and it's the right stuff. So I hope there are more seats at the table. Thank you everyone for joining in. Everyone's Twitter handles are on here, except for Bastian's.
I didn't want to leave in the middle of the conversation, change my name, so.
Yes, but he was tagged by Jeremy on Twitter, so this conversation doesn't need to stop. There are some great conversations on Twitter. Sounds like there's some amazing conferences coming up as well, so definitely check those out. And thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye, folks.